Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruber. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
It was closer. And I'm Kathy Gruber. And Jason, he's not doing well today. So
brain's going a little slow. I'm like, what podcast are we doing? How do we do the intros normally?
So speaking of altered states, perfect segue. So today we were going to talk about psychedelics and the burgeoning third wave of psychedelics and how different states and cities are decriminalizing. I'm actually finishing up a psychedelic coach training program so that I can help guide people and integrate them after experiences. And so we thought we'd just kind of talk about that. And how you can use that, how people are using them, and sort of the pros and cons of looking at altered states and heightened states. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, and I think it's going to be an interesting discussion because again, I hope maybe I'll just bring up one thing to begin with that we can talk about, right? Is I think it's great, right? And for some people, it's exactly the right thing. But around the intention, right? And to make sure that because we've had people on the podcast before, right? And in pop culture, we usually just refer to them as psychedelics, right? But they're sacred plant medicine. And so, just to try to make that distinction, because I think there's some people that are out there who are like, oh, well, it's really cool. I think I want to try it. Well, why do you want to try it? Well, I want to get high. Well, maybe that's not the right intention, for doing it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. And, Kathy, since you're going through some of the training too, it'd be kind of interesting to, think of it from that standpoint. I mean, how would you describe, if people are listening and they're like, well, I think I might want to try that, or there's some questions or things maybe that they should ask themselves to kind of see if they have the right intention, if this might be right for them, or, because again, everything is not right for everybody.
100%.
So yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's sort of reemerged over the last 5 or 10 years. And even though it disappeared in the 60s, and then they started to do a little bit of research in the 80s, which got shut down, it's never gone away. Millions of people have tried LSD, millions of people have tried mushrooms, and it tended to be this very like counterculture, what was it? Drop in, drop.
Oh yeah, Timothy Leary.
Timothy Leary thing, right?
Yeah,
peace out, drop in. I don't remember what it was. I'm butchering that. But it tended to be this, we all get together and have this hippie love-in sort of thing. And then it went into the research realm, and they were seeing that there was benefits for depression, PTSD, anxiety, so that research started happening. And then the counterculture, in quotes, kind of went, hey, why did we suppress this? Like, this is, it's opening. It is conscious driven. And one of the questions that they asked, I'm in a pod of 15 people, and we have 45 total that are going through this program right now. We're the 5th cohort to go through this program. And one of the questions the very first days was, somebody said, if someone just wants to try this because they're curious, do you lead them through that journey? And some people said yes, and some people said no. And it's like when people have called me and said, I really want to try hypnosis, which is an altered state. And I said, well, why? What's your objective? They go, I don't know. I've never done it. I just want to see what it feels like. I have no problem taking people through a hypnosis session to either radiate good feelings or help them drop things that they no longer need, or just so they can have that experience of what that feels like. And when they get through it, do they keep going? Do they not keep going? That is up to you. So for me personally, if somebody would call me, or if someone's listening and says, I just want to experience what it's like to do mushrooms, go for it. Make sure you're in a safe setting. Make sure you know where you got the medicine from. Make sure you have a sitter. Don't, on some Saturday afternoon, decide to take 4 grams of mushrooms and hope for the best. You want to make sure you're prepped for that.
No.
Because I know people that do that. They're like, I just want to see what this is like. And, their husband leaves for the day and they take a shit ton of mushrooms and they're tripping for 6 hours. Could be fun, or not. And, you do want to make sure you have someone there with you. And I think because this is now becoming so mainstream, I think people are taking this medicine into their own hands. Yay, empowerment. And let's be smart about that. So what is what is your mindset? Are you trying to make this as a quick fix? Are you trying to escape? Are you trying to, what is that intention for? And then what is the setting? If you're at a big music festival someplace and you're surrounded by a bunch of other people tripping, that is fine, except are you safe, psychologically safe, emotionally safe, physically safe? And this is why now they have tents set up at most music festivals where if you're having a bad trip or if you're having an experience that you're not comfortable with, you go to this tent and they have trained sitters and trained integrative specialists that can help you through that experience. So, know who you're around, know what the setting is going to be. And I've talked to so many people like, oh my God, I had the worst trip. And then as they recount it, they go, oh, but of course I was, around 300 other people out in a field, not knowing where I was, not sure where the bathroom was, didn't know how much I took. Well, Jesus, of course you're going to have a bad experience. I mean, not that that's guaranteed. Everybody's so unique and individual with that. And then afterwards, what is the integration process? And I have a client who's really interested in starting to do some journeys with me. And he said, but what do you mean by integration? And I said, well, you're a massage client. I said, when you get off the table, you go home, you drink water, you rest a little bit, you stretch, you walk around. I said, if you get an hour and a half deep tissue massage and you go right onto the pickleball court or go right to sitting at your desk, you didn't integrate any of that work. And not to say it was a waste, but you're not getting the maximum benefit from that. So that's been drilled into my head since I started this program: set and setting and integration afterwards. And then also know the medicine. Some people are fine with LSD. Some people want to do mushrooms. Some people go to do bufo or ayahuasca. Some people do MDMA. Some people do a combo. You have to know what that medicine is going to do and what your intention with that medicine is. And I think when we start there, then you're going to have a more, because it's not always pleasant, a more safe and beneficial experience. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, and I think, just like we've talked about before, I mean, if you're curious and you have the right intention, right? If you're like, oh man, I want to get high, well, go take another substance that's not necessarily a psychedelic or hallucinogen or a plant medicine, right? Because you're kind of disrespecting the whole side behind it, and there is a whole spiritual, metaphysical side behind it that you don't want to be mocking or mocking is maybe a good word, right?
Yeah, I like that. Well, because it can be a huge deal, and altered states of consciousness are not to go into lightly because it will change you. And are you ready for that change? What do you want from that change? Is it time for that change? And, my client who wants to do this sort of megadose journey to stop his depression, he's like, I'm looking at this as a magic bullet. And I said, well, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, because it may or may not be, right, the magic bullet for him in that particular thing. And that's why, on the podcast, I mean, it's been 5 years or more. We've been talking now. I mean, we're always about too. It's like, don't believe us. Don't, we're just sharing our experiences
100%.
With the guests. It may be right for you. It may not be right for you. I don't know. You're not going to know unless you try it. Right. And so we've always been one of, hey, if you're curious, try it out. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, great. Right. Yeah. And I know for myself personally, I've never taken any psychedelic. I have, used marijuana before, and it's not really for me. It's like, and no judgment on anybody else, but it's like, I've done it a few times, right? And there's specific phases that you kind of go through with marijuana, and it's like one of like the 4 or 5 I really like. The other ones I don't like. Right? I just, that's just me, right? And I've had a few experiences where it's like that wasn't really the best for me, so I just choose not to do that. I get into altered states, I relax using different tools and methods because that's what works better for me. Right? But if it works great for other people, great, right? But again, it's going into it, I think, with the right intention, because like you said, and I think this is, and maybe you can talk more about this, that I think, like you said, that person was thinking, oh, this is going to be a magic bullet, or I'm going to take ayahuasca and it's going to be this happy love fest hippie thing where I'm feeling all this joy and love, and it's not that way all the time. It's an
Yep.
altered state of consciousness, but you don't get to control what is happening in
Right.
those altered states.
Yeah, and I think going into that, knowing that you don't get this is the thing that I hear all the time. You don't get the trip you want, you get the trip you need.
Mhm.
And sometimes it shows you not great stuff. I mean, I actually did a conscious cannabis ceremony a couple weeks ago, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago now. And I had never used cannabis. I've always used cannabis recreationally. I was a theater major. It was sort of a requirement. Go to Boca, do improv, come back, tell us how it was.
There's certain circles where it's like the joint just
Theater,
gets passed around.
That's what, yeah, seriously, circle, you just took whatever went by. And it was a blast. And then I went 20 years without ever touching a substance. And then when I sort of rediscovered cannabis and I realized, oh, give me a good sativa and I'll just sit around and giggle and get creative and sensual. And, that works for me. Indica puts me to sleep. I don't want indica unless I want to sleep. So, again, with stuff like this, you have to understand there's different strains, there's different dosages, there's different growing ways. There's all this stuff, especially with cannabis. It's an endless amount of.
It's like going into a wine bar. I mean, when you go into some of these dispensaries, it's like, I mean, it's mind blowing. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different choices.
Yeah. Do you smoke it? Do you vape it? Do you use an edible? Do you use a drink? Because now we have drinks. You could go get a little fizzy thing that's got what's it, LSD? Not that has THC in it.
You can get a fuzzy drink with LSD in it too.
You can have that too. I have people that have done that too. But it's like, you have to figure out what works for you. And if you realize it doesn't, that doesn't mean the whole thing doesn't. It might be that one thing that doesn't work, that one kind that doesn't work for you. But yeah, it's about setting that intention, and not chasing a past trip, which I also hear a lot of people doing. Their first time is so amazing, or they had this one thing that was so great and they keep trying it more and more and more to get back to that feeling. That was an isolated thing. You might not get back to that. To close the loop, when I did the conscious cannabis ceremony, I saw some really scary things. And I saw some disturbing images that I had to face and say, what are you here to show me? And when you surrender to that, and when you look them in the face and say, I'm here, what do you want from me? It kind of dissipates. It's when people run from that that it ends up being a bad trip. Or if you're around people that aren't supportive, or people who are predatory, or you're at some party and somebody slips you something that you're not sure what it is, and then they take advantage. That's not a good scene. And this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using this in a very therapeutic way. If you use it recreationally, I honestly don't have a problem with that. Just make sure you're protected. But I'm talking about the therapeutic sense, where you've got the headset on and you've got the eye mask on, and someone is there sitting with you to make sure you're safe. And the sitter, if I have a couple friends who have never tried mushrooms who want to, but they don't want to do it by themselves, but they don't want to do it in a group. And that's the time you call a sitter in, right? And the sitter makes sure you have your blanket and gives you the pillow and holds your hand if that's something you agreed to ahead of time, and gets you water and gives you more medicine if you need it, and gets you to the bathroom, and do you need a snack, and this music sucks and I'm cold, and that's what the sitter does for you. They're not integrating you, they're not getting you the medicine, they're just making sure you're safe psychologically and physically in that journey. And then I also want to start helping them integrate before and after, helping them set that intention, making sure they're choosing the right medicine, not giving it to them because that's illegal, and making sure they're integrated afterwards. So that's sort of my objective in working with this. And then also having people on microdosing protocols, because you don't have to do a macro journey to use the medicine in a way that'll help you with your healing and your self-discovery.
Yeah, because microdosing is a new thing that's really becoming big. And like I said, there's been a lot of scientific research behind this, starting in the 60s and the 80s, and they've kind of picked it up 10 years ago or something like that again. That there are a lot of benefits. But I think it's, one of the phrases that you used, which I thought was interesting, is it's not the trip you want, it's the trip you need. And I think, that's true whether you're using psychedelics or not,
Or
right?
breath
It's like,
work,
or breath
or
work, or
meditation, or
anything, right?
Mhm.
Is you get the trip that you need, not the trip that you want. And so, again, if you're actually using different practices or substances for your spiritual involvement, again, it's like you're going to get what you need. And Kathy was talking about there, some of these disturbing images. It kind of reminds me, for everybody that's seen or read the Harry Potter books, and there's those dementors that come in, right, that are, I think, effectively, it's kind of like your worst nightmare, and the only way to get rid of it is to face it,
Mhm.
right? To face it. And with our evolvement, spiritually, emotionally, physically, it doesn't matter. You have to face those things often to be able to get past
Yep.
and then be able to integrate in. And so it's like you said, if people are thinking it's all going to be unicorns and rainbows every time you do something, it ain't, right?
Mhm.
So if that's what you're thinking it's going to be, then don't do it. Know what you're getting into, right? And we've had people on the podcast before, about that. And I think that's part of that intention thing too, is just know what could happen,
Yep.
what may happen, have the right intention, right? In going into it.
Yep. I'm about to do, I mean, this will have aired after this, but this weekend I'm doing a bufo ceremony. And
Mhm.
bufo is the toad venom, where
Mhm.
they kind of milk the toad and then they crystallize it and you vaporize it and you smoke it. And it's an incredible, powerful medicine. It is not to be entered in lightly. And I had the integration call last night where for an hour we talked about how to prep for this and how to pick your intention and how to surrender to the medicine and what may happen afterwards and what may happen during. And she shared some ugly experiences of, well, we had one person that this happened to them and we had one person that this happened to that, not saying this is going to happen to you, but letting us know it might be ugly for a second, projectile vomiting all over this woman's room, or, the person thrashing to the point where they tore their calf muscle because their body was just freaking out. They do everything in their power to make sure you're in a safe place and you don't know what's going to happen. So finding a way to surrender to that discomfort, same thing in a deep stretch in a yoga class, right? When you're tensed up and you're not letting your body go, that's when the stretch is harder. And when you can just relax those muscles and breathe. Same thing with a deep massage or, meditation, or it is about that surrender. And, I've not used tons of medicine to this point, but the experiences I've had truly have been life-changing. And for people that want to try that, I want to help them facilitate that. I have 2 clients on microdosing protocols right now. One's depression is pretty much gone after a lifetime of it. And the other one's ADD has kind of reversed, where I see this like this more focus and linear thinking and easier time with brain stuff. I mean, it's been phenomenal to watch. It's been really fascinating.
Hmm.
It's been really fascinating.
Wow. Well, and I know, like you said, I mean, obviously having somebody who's trained to help you go through it, right? And but I was thinking too that maybe, like you said, I've been a sitter for people before, but again, I'm not integrating. I'm just making sure that they're physically safe,
Yep.
and I can do that. But again, sometimes as a sitter, it's like, are you consciously saying this that I should believe you and know this, or is this something else? So but anyway, but are there certain of the medicines that you absolutely should not only do with a sitter, right? Or because like I said, I know that there's kind of varying degrees,
Yeah.
and again, depending on the dosage and things like that you take, but are there certain of these that it's like, nope, don't just have somebody sit for you to make sure you're safe, but these are ones that you absolutely need somebody who's trained
Yeah. I
to be
mean,
able to help you with?
ketamine has become recreational. And there's a lot of people who are doing ketamine at home or who are microdosing ketamine. In my school, we were told, period, you do not microdose MDMA and you do not microdose ketamine. Those are chemical substances that can become addictive. MDMA is not something you should do frequently. It's Molly or ecstasy, or MDA is the other sort of version of it. And some people do psilocybin journey with some MDMA in it, and I know people that have done that. I've taken them separately. I finished an LSD trip with some MDMA, which was such a beautiful experience, but I was not doing this alone. I had someone there with me. You don't want to do something like bufo or ayahuasca. That's a sacred religious spiritual experience. And I'm actually going to a temple that is a church to do this medicine with a priestess, with a shaman, basically. Those are things you're not going to plop down on the weekend and go, let's do ayahuasca this weekend. It's a ritual. It's a ceremony. The safest one, you're probably not going to have a bad reaction from MDMA. You clench your jaw, you can get a headache, you can throw up if you take too much. There's been no reports ever of somebody dying from overdosing on LSD or mushrooms. And people took huge amounts of LSD and ended up in a coma, which I still don't recommend, which they came out of, but no one has died from taking these medicines. And that's what's so frustrating. It's not heroin, it's not crystal meth, it's not fentanyl, it's not, and this is why so many states and cities are starting to decriminalize this medicine, because it's not the problem. It's not the problem drug. I would say something like, if you're going to do a heroic dose of mushrooms, you want a sitter, you want to make sure you're going into it with the right intention. I've taken lower dose mushrooms by myself, but with somebody close, by on the phone that I could call if I needed something. Maybe 1 gram, 1.5 grams. If you're doing over 3 or 4, you want people there for you, I believe. Unless you're very experienced. We had Carlos on, who talked at great length about his, he's done hundreds of journeys. He's probably fine taking 5 grams by himself, but he knows what he's doing. He has a support system that he could call people if he needed to. So, it's such an individual thing, but something like, ketamine, you do that in a clinic setting, and that's really popular. Ketamine is now legal to do in the United States as a therapeutic substance. So we have a ketamine clinic literally opening in Santa Barbara. I'm going to the open house this weekend, and I'll be curious what they do, because I have heard, and I'm not saying this is what this person's doing, it's very clinical. They put you in the room, they hook up your IV, you do the ketamine, and then they go, okay, thanks. And they don't get any integration afterwards.
Well, because I wanted to ask you about integration too. So maybe and that's a good lead into it as well, is, and that's the one thing, like you said, somebody like Carlos, who's done hundreds of them, he probably, is fine taking it and even understanding how to integrate afterwards. But so many people aren't. And so if you're taking these, by yourself, right, what does integration actually look like? How does that kind of work? Because I think, and again, that's the one where, if people are doing this by themselves and just experimenting, that's what worries me the most, is the lack of integration. And sometimes that can make things worse.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
If you're not integrated.
Absolutely. And one of the things that, the Bufo gal talked about last night in this pre-call was talking about integration afterwards. And she's like, take a couple days if you can take off work, be in nature, journal, sit with that experience. And, when I was doing the conscious cannabis ceremony, when I would kind of come out of it, I would take notes, because I dropped in and out probably 5 times during the ceremony. Which surprised me, because I came out the first time and I went, oh, well, geez, am I done? It's only been 45 minutes. And I went right back in. And I was taking notes, which one of the other girls in the experience, she said, oh my God, there's no way I could have set up and journaled. So it's such an individual thing. Some people were out the entire 3 hours. I was in and out and very much choosing whether I wanted to go back in. And there's even been times with psilocybin and the one time I've done LSD, after the peak of it, I feel like I could have answered the door and talked to the pizza guy. At that point, you almost choose your level of being in it. You close your eyes and you're right back in, but you open your eyes, you're like, oh, hey, blah, 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 TV, blah, blah, blah. And then you can go right back. At least is my experience with it. But the integration is such an individual thing. And there are so many integration specialists. This is what I'm training to do, is help people integrate these experiences. Okay, so, you dropped into the abyss and you had ego death, and Mother Mary came and embraced you and gave you all these gifts. do you just go back to your job and not think about that ever again? Or how do you bring that back into your waking life? How do you bring that discovery back to your real world and make that work for you in a way? And some of the stuff that I saw during the conscious cannabis ceremony was so eye-opening to me. And I went, oh, okay, I've just learned things about myself. I've just sort of upped a level of my learning, of my evolution by having this experience, which I think would have taken me a lot longer without the medicine. But now what do I do with that? Do I go back to being a dick at the guy at Starbucks, or do I somehow make that a part of my life? And it looks different for everybody, I think, at this point. I believe that.
Yeah, well, again, I don't know. I'm just asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, I mean, from what you're talking about there, part of integration maybe is kind of almost like talking with somebody, not therapy or coaching, but in a way, right? To where you're kind of sharing what happened, and maybe the other person is asking you some questions or giving you some guidance,
Mm-hmm.
at least as far as what they're seeing, or maybe helping you to understand these things at a deeper level. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, I mean, you get the trip you need, not the one you want. And so again, you're entering into a non-ordinary reality space,
Yep.
which means trees are going to talk to you. There's going to be other things like that might happen. You might see beings, images, I don't know, whatever that you cannot even describe because it's so foreign to you.
There's no
And
words for it.
there's no words for it, right?
Yeah.
And
So
so yeah, how does that kind of look, in a typical, like you said, if there's no typical, but I guess maybe
there's
just
no
give people
typical.
some ideas of.
I have never had an experience where, with my eyes open, things have morphed into something else. I've seen things kind of get a little wiggly and colors seem brighter, but like the wallpaper hasn't started talking to me. When I close my eyes, whoo, it's a world. you know. I had a client of mine come back from a 7-hour psilocybin journey. It was very formal. He had two, calls with this woman ahead of time. He went up to Northern California, was given the medicine, laid in on the couch, and tripped for 7-8 hours. And afterwards, when he came back from that and he was sharing parts of it with me, he was very sensitive to loud, negative, violent. He couldn't hear certain stories that were a little unpleasant. He was very raw. And it took him a while to integrate. He's not drink since, and that was not his objective. He was a total wine person, hasn't had a sip of alcohol, can't do it. Tried, doesn't like it. So that changed that. He has a completely different perspective on his relationships, completely different perspective on his job. He's probably switching careers. And he said after the first time we talked, and I wasn't integrating him, I was just massaging him and he was sharing the experience. He said, there's certain things I'm not ready to share yet, because what seems to happen is when I share them with people, I'm not processing them anymore. So once it was
So he hasn't personally processed it enough yet to share it. Yeah.
Yep. And so he shared part of the stuff that he had already processed, and it's been months and he's still sharing more. So this has been a long term, and he's journaling every day, and he's, out in nature, and he's exercising, and he's also really giving himself permission to do what he has the kind of job that you can do that. I can't just in the middle of the day go, I feel like walking on the beach, and leave my clients there. I don't quite have that freedom to do that. But I know after my Bufo ceremony, I took the next morning off. I'm not working till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be tired. I don't know if I'm going to be asleep. I don't know if I want to sit on the beach. I don't know if I want to rock and cry holding a stuffed animal. I don't know what that's going to look like for me. And so I took as much time as I felt I could in my crazy schedule to give myself the gentleness to start to integrate that experience. And after the conscious cannabis ceremony, I sat down with Eric and I told him what I experienced. And I also shared with my client, who shared with me his mushroom journey, what I experienced. And I think I had the conversation with 3 or 4 people to help me integrate what that meant. And they asked me interesting questions, and they had some interesting insight where I went, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that is what that meant for me, because you're interpreting so much, right?
Well, yeah, because like you said, you're experiencing things that are outside of what we're used to here in kind of this linear 3D time.
Yep.
And sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around it. And sometimes they're literal, sometimes they're figurative. And so it's almost kind of like dream interpretation sometimes, where it's like,
100%.
what did that actually mean? Right. And sometimes, a lot of times you have to kind of sit with that, you know, for a while and ask yourself questions, or have other people ask questions, or, you know, but there's benefit in that too. You know, with psychedelics without as well, right? Where it's like, just sometimes having somebody else in the room or talking about some of these things helps you in the integration, and you get insights that you never would have gotten before. I mean, a few of the people that I know, they channel in that. So there's been a lot of times that I've been talking with some of my friends, and they will randomly say something and not know that they actually even said it. Right. Like one of my friends, there was a group of us, and she was over on the one side of the room meditating. Right. So we were quietly talking kind of on the other side of the house. And all of a sudden, in the middle of her meditation, she loudly says like 2 sentences. And so we look over like, oh, she must be done. No, she was still in meditation. But the rest of us were like, what did that mean? And one person was like, I think she just said that to me. And we're like, what do you mean? Well, oh my gosh, yes, that's what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, as you're talking to somebody and they just make some comment, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe it means this, or I'm kind of feeling blah 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 blah, whatever, right? And, you know, that's again a way a lot of times that we do understand, and we can start to integrate these things.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing too is, you know, just to make sure and kind of put an exclamation mark behind, is your life will never be the same after you do some of these things, or even some of the other practices, like some of the breathwork things. People's life is never the same after you've had some of those trips. So if you're not ready to have your world rocked, to be open to the non-ordinary reality and what's really going on out there that we can't physically with our eyes and our body know is there. If you're not ready for that, then maybe you're not ready, right? Because you don't know where it's going to go. But I can guarantee you your life will never be the same. I haven't taken some of these substances, but I've had enough out of body, non-ordinary reality experiences in my life to know that you are never the same. Once you see something, once you hear something, once you see something, once you know something, you cannot unknow it.
Yeah, you can't unring that bell.
You can't unring the bell. So if you're not ready for it, maybe take a little pause, right? Because there's also you're given in a way more responsibility. Once you know better, you have to do better. Yeah.
So to bottom line, so if you are ready, know what substance you want to do, have a good source for that substance, you know, especially if it's something like MDMA or LSD, you want to make sure that you know where that's coming from. Get a test kit, make sure you're getting it from a reputable source. Also, most of the stuff's still illegal. So we are in no way, Jason and I, advocating that you go do illegal activity. Not advocating that at all. However, if you're going to, please make sure that you know your intention, make sure you're in a good, healthy setting, and make sure you integrate this afterwards. That is so important. Many places are decriminalizing it, so things are shifting. And unfortunately, in California, Governor Newsom decided not to sign that bill, which really pissed off a lot of us. We think that's a run for president. He doesn't want to be the president that legalized LSD, or the candidate. So, but regardless, you know, there are ways to experience this in a safe and healthy way. And if you're ready, just be smart about it. You know, just use your head, as my dad used to say. So there it is. And if I can help in any way, let me know.
Yeah, reach out to Kathy. And, you know, like I said, and this is just one thing that it's great. I mean, I think it is wonderful that this is becoming more available. But, like Kathy said, something even like about the source, know where you're getting it from, because the problem is, and this is true with anything, when something starts to gain in popularity, people will start doing this just to make money. And to make more money, they do things like cutting product. I mean, you see that in other illegal drugs all the time. How many deaths because they're cutting coke with fentanyl, things like that.
And this is why mushrooms are your safest best choice. Because you just pick them. You can't, you're not cutting them with it, you're not processing them. Just make sure you know where stuff is coming from.
Where stuff's coming from.
Yeah. And get a test kit. You can get it on Amazon, a party test kit.
Oh, really? You can buy it on Amazon? It's called the party test kit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's tons of test kits because they're recognizing, look, people are doing this, let's make it as safe as we can. So you get everything but the drugs on Amazon. They'll probably at one point have the the ketamine section that you can buy. So anyway, be safe, be smart, set and setting, know your intention, make sure you integrate afterwards, have someone there with you that can support you through your journey, and have a good trip. I'm Kathy Gruber. I could be reached at kathygruber.coach. We'll put that one up today.
Oh, kathygruber.coach. And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode of Fire and Earth Podcast. See ya.